Oh, yay, oh, yay, oh, yay. May all who have business before the Honorable, the Supreme Grizzlies Court of Locked On Grizzlies are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. Grizz save Locked On Grizzlies and this honorable court. We are about to conduct the trial of Taylor Jenkins. Is he or is he not a good basketball coach? We're going to dissect it all on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Order in the court. Order in the court. The Honorable Judge Joe Mullinax is now presiding. I have my gavel here for our YouTube viewers. Brevin Knight is my gavel. And you know that Brevin Knight is the voice of reason when it comes to Memphis Grizzlies matters. So we are in session here in this special edition of Locked On Grizzlies. I am joined not by my co-host, but by my co-judge, Damichael Cole, the commercial appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. And in the court of Locked On Grizzlies, we are the judge and the jury. Maybe not the executioner. It's just basketball. We're not going to get that serious. But we are both the judge and the jury, and we're the prosecution, we're the defense. We're the whole legal system when it comes to the trial of Taylor Jenkins. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Wherever you get your podcast is where you can check out Locked On Grizzlies, proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Again, free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, all those fun things. But the time for fun is over. It's not fun being 3-13, Damichael Cole. I know you know that. And you know what? Instead of getting angry, we're gonna bring justice, Brevin Knight justice into this thing. And we are going to, again, call court in session. We're putting Taylor Jenkins, the head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies, on trial. Now, here's how it's going to work. I and my co-host, again, co-judge and jury, Damichael Cole, the commercial appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, he does not have as cool of a gavel as me, but what he does have is a lot of logical arguments both for and against Taylor Jenkins. So we're going to argue the pros of Taylor Jenkins as a coach. We're going to argue the cons of Taylor Jenkins as a coach. And by the end of this episode, we are going to have a decisive verdict when it comes to whether or not Taylor Jenkins is a good coach, if he's guilty or not guilty of the crime of poor coaching. I am fired up. I know Damichael is too. So let's get into it. And we're going to allow the prosecution to go first. The prosecution's going up first. They are on the attack. They're on the aggressive side. And Taylor Jenkins is a bad basketball coach. And here's why, Damichael Cole. He's bad. He is bad because he struggles with rotations, both on the floor and off of it. He is guilty of overhelping and committing the same sins of his mentor, Mike Budenholzer, being so stubborn that he is not willing to make adjustments when they are necessary. He is guilty of not seeing the right types of players that need to be lined up alongside each other. I'm not trying to pretend that I'm an NBA basketball coach, Damichael Cole. I'm a lowly high school football coach. I'm a lowly high school football coach, right? That's all I am. I'm not trying to pretend I know as much as Taylor Jenkins does, but I do know this. When your team is struggling to defend the three-point line, you need to make an adjustment. When your team has not scored more than 100 points in 4 straight basketball games, you need to make an adjustment. And yet, adjustments are few and far between. We continue to see drop coverage. We continue to see overhelping. We continue to see isolation basketball. Taylor Jenkins is guilty as charged. Oh, wait, I'm still the prosecution. I'm not a judge.
Hey,
I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm excited. This is fun. Now, remember, we're still the prosecution, you and I. So you got to add. Right, we're arguing against Taylor Jenkins here.
And here's why Taylor Jenkins is in our courtroom right now. Taylor Jenkins is in this courtroom after being a model citizen for the past 4 years with the Memphis Grizzlies. He's made some mistakes here, And now we've been brought to the question, as to speak in basketball terms and playing basketball terms, some of you have kind of alluded to the idea of firing Taylor Jenkins, which is why me and Joe Mullinax have put him on the stand today. Now
he's on trial.
He's on trial. He's not on the stand. He's on trial. You locked on Grizzlies. You're the ones on the stands. You let us know what you think, and that will factor into our verdict as well. But with all that being said, here's why, from the prosecution standpoint, here's why he is here, Joe Mullinax. It's simple. Taylor Jenkins, for 4 consecutive years, has displayed certain things about this team that needs to be fixed, specifically in the last 2 seasons when this team won above 50 games, when they made the playoffs as the number 2 seed, and we saw the same issues show up time and time again. You talked about the rotation issues. I'm going to take it a step further. It's not just the rotation alignment issues here. It's in the past, it's been the allotment of minutes, but this year, that's really not a problem because, quite frankly, you got to play your best guys because you don't have a lot of guys available. But with this year's team, here's the biggest problem with me. We're still having this conversation about the half-court offense. And it's as simple as the reason he is here right now, the reason we have him on trial is because we spent all offseason, right? First gear, second gear, how the Grizzlies are going to improve in these areas. Go check out my story on commercialappeal.com that's came out this morning where I kind of dissected the Grizzlies over the last 4 years. They've had 3 areas on the offensive end where they've really stood out above the pack in the NBA. One of those areas is the transition scoring. The Grizzlies have been a top 6 team in the NBA in transition scoring each of the previous 4 seasons under Taylor Jenkins. You want to know where they are right now? They're in the bottom third of the league, 22nd, 23rd.
Bottom third.
Then, what about paint scoring? Not only have the Grizzlies been they've been the best paint scoring team the entire tenure under Taylor Jenkins. This year, in the bottom third. So how do you adjust? One of the things I like about some of the best coaches in the NBA right now is you have to have the ability. You can't be a one-hit wonder. Right now, Taylor Jenkins, to me, he is a power hitter. For baseball term, he is a power hitter who can hit 40 home runs, but he's not hitting for average around here. He is good at what he's good at. He's good at paint scoring. He's good at having one of the best rebounding teams when he has the horses to do it to the level that he wants to do it. And he's good at having a team run the floor really well. But we haven't seen the Grizzlies have a great shooting season yet. We haven't seen the Grizzlies be an effective half-court offense yet. And we've already talked about, some of the three-point issues on defense that are still, lingering with the team right now. So my main problem, Joe Mullinax, is we have not seen him kind of, evolve as a coach. He has been good at what he's been good at. Season in and season out, the Grizzlies are going to be really good at paint scoring, transition in those things. But remember, we spent all offseason talking about the half-court efficiency. Newsflash. I know guys are out. We'll get more to that a little bit later, but they're still not good in half-court efficiency. And they look different, but it's still not good. The results are not there right now, and that's the biggest problem for me. Because guess what? You can win a few regular season games when all those guys get back. But in the playoffs, just like it showed up against Golden State, just like it showed up against the Minnesota Timberwolves, just like it showed up real bad against the Los Angeles Lakers, it could happen again.
It could happen again, and there is not consistent growth. You do not see it from him. You see it from the players that he develops, and maybe that can go under the pro category when the prosecution rests and the defense takes.
And a new coach, right? We hadn't talked. Remember the new coach was supposed to help evolve the offense,
fix all of these offensive problems, and that's interesting. It's hard to fix offensive problems when you have limited offensive players. Is probably what folks that would be arguing in favor of Taylor Jenkins might be saying, and we will broach that topic here momentarily. But I do think to just, before the prosecution rests, the idea here is this is a guy who has been given the keys to the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
He's been given the opportunity to mold these young players, to put them in a position to find their way in the NBA, to mold and, just kind of shape their perspective of what NBA basketball is. Because a lot of these guys have only played for the Memphis Grizzlies. And while the development physically is there, the development of scheme, it seems more and more when you watch this team, opposing teams, whether it's Dylan Brooks saying he knows them like the back of his hand. He played for the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
I watched this team night in and night out, Damichael, and it looks like the opponents know what the Grizzlies are going to do because they do the same stuff. There hasn't been a ton of evolution. It's like they've fallen back to what they were prior to the coaching shift. And that leads us to a place where it looks like a broken system, even though it may have more to do with the fact there's so many broken players, which will probably lead us into our prosecution resting and our defense standing up for Taylor Jenkins next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. You're probably aware of this by now, but the NFL is kicking into high gear as the weather gets colder, winter approaches. The NFL stays hot over on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, the always popular same-game parlay, and so much more. So what are you waiting for? Go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off not just the NBA season, but the NFL one with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. The prosecution rests. The defense takes up their case for Taylor Jenkins, the basketball coach, here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax of Bluff City Media, Memphis Grizzlies columnist over for that website. Damichael Cole, my co-host of the Commercial Appeal. They're in Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. But I'm falling into habits. This is a special episode.
There we go.
We're back in session. We're back in court. The prosecution has rested in the trial of Taylor Jenkins. Now the defense is taking the stand. They're taking up the case. And I'm going to lead off with Exhibit A being something from Reddit, which is always something that you should probably be nervous about. Whenever you're using a Reddit argument.
What are you about to tell us, Joe?
I don't know if you saw this on my social media at Joe Mullinax on X, but there's a Reddit thread that has kind of gained some steam over on the Reddit NBA page. And the thread is about what if we Grizzly-fied the NBA? And the purpose of it was to argue that the Grizzlies as currently constructed are not going to be a team that is able to compete any more than any other NBA team. So they went through and they used NBA 2K, which again, this is not a perfect science. I want to stress that. But they used NBA 2K overall rankings, right? Mm-hmm. And they came up with the current Grizzlies 10-man rotation: Jacob Gilyard, Desmond Bane, Santi Aldama, Jaren Jackson Jr., Bismack Biyombo, Derrick Rose, Zaire Williams, David Roddy, John Conchar. And they have Kenny Lofton Jr., which I guess is true. But again, it's not a perfect rotation, but it's also Reddit. So we'll just ride with it from there. So if we were going to apply the logic of removing the opposing teams' 6th, 5th, 4th, 9th, 7th, 15th, and 1st best player, this is what would happen to a team like the Boston Celtics. Mm-hmm. Point guard, Delano Banton. Shooting guard, Jaylen Brown. Small forward, Lamar Stevens. Power forward, Sam Hauser. Starting center, Kristaps Porzingis. Luke Cornett, O'Shea Brissett, Nathan Knight, Neemias Queta, and J.D. Davison. That would be their 10-man rotation. According to the NBA 2K, that would be their 10-man rotation, okay? Let's take a look at the Golden State Warriors. Corey Joseph, Klay Thompson, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, Draymond Green. Their bench would be Usman Garuba, Trace Jackson Davis, Brandon Podziemski, big fan of Locked On Grizzlies, as we're a big fan of him. Gui Santos, who I refuse to believe is a real person, and Lester Quiones, okay? I'll give you one more, okay? This will be Exhibit C. Okay. Say it is the Minnesota Timberwolves, who just beat the tar out of the Memphis Grizzlies. Starting point guard would be Shake Milton. Starting shooting guard would be NAW, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Starting small forward, would be Troy Brown Jr. Power forward would be Cat, Karl Anthony Towns. Rudy Gobert would be the center. The bench would be Luka Garza, Wendell Moore Jr., Leonard Miller, Dayshaun Nix, and Jalen Clark. The defense's argument is this. the prosecution may have some points that are fair to be made, but how in the world can they be made in this environment where the Memphis Grizzlies are missing this many players? And content creators like you and I, Damichael, we sit around, we try to figure out what we're going to write. We're trying to come up with how we're going to try to fix the Memphis Grizzlies. And sometimes it's as simple as just writing down 2 words: get healthy. Does that fix the Grizzlies as a title contender? Probably not. Are the Grizzlies missing the playoffs if they're healthy? Absolutely not. You can't convince me of that any other way. And Taylor Jenkins, who was the same guy as the head coach who led this team to 2 consecutive number 2 overall seeds in the regular season, he didn't just suddenly forget how to coach basketball. The health of the Grizzlies is the biggest issue. And once that improves, miraculously, they'll go on a winning streak and Taylor Jenkins will be a good basketball coach again. Oh, wait, he was a good basketball coach the entire time. It's hard to coach if your best players aren't on the floor.
All right. Well, as listening to the prosecution earlier when I first spoke in the first segment, now in Taylor Jenkins' defense, I'm going to attack that same prosecution in what they said about Taylor Jenkins. So kind of going a little bit into what you just said. A little
cross-examination. I like that.
Yeah, a little cross-examination going on. So you say that the Grizzlies right now, they're not evolving, right? Well, guess what? If they had their main guys, they would be able to emphasize the strengths that they've had over the past 4 years. And then we would see if that could lead to the evolution where we talk about, a new coach, a new assistant coach and things like that. My point is, here's the thing. Paint scoring. Ja Morant 2 seasons ago led the entire NBA in paint scoring. Ja Morant, each of the 4 years he's been at the NBA, the Grizzlies have been number 1 in the NBA in paint scoring. This year, again, they're 22nd, 23rd. Each of the last 4 years with Ja Morant as a starting point guard, number 1. So when Ja Morant gets back, the paint scoring is going to improve. That is a key component to the Memphis Grizzlies. Once teams zero in on that more, guess what? Desmond Bane, who's shooting 35.9% from three-point range right now. We've never seen Desmond Bane have a season below 40% three-point shoot. So guess
that's
what?
Going to improve. He's going to progress to the mean.
That is going to improve. Jaren Jackson Jr. is shooting around 41% right now. He's done that before. But at the end of the day, he shot 50% last season. I would like to think he could at least get up to around 44, 45% when he's down to the third option. And then nevertheless, the transition scoring. Ja Morant's going to get back. He's going to push the basketball. Desmond Bane is going to continue to push the basketball. And the attention that Ja Morant draws in getting Marcus Smart back, who's another guy who, remember, was near the top of the NBA in total steals at the time that he got hurt. You talk about a guy who's going to get deflections, who's going to get steals. All of that is going to lead to more transition scoring opportunities. Then what? The Grizzlies will get back to that swagger, fun team where you're used to seeing 2 Ja Morant highlights per game, an alley-oop, a highlight block somewhere. All of those things will be back. And guess what? It'll be up to Taylor Jenkins to help the team evolve at that point. My point is, once the Grizzlies are able to find an identity, which should be similar to that of the past season, then he should have a better clue of how to evolve and revolutionize the team around him.
We literally have never seen Ja Morant and Marcus Smart play together. It's never happened. We've literally never seen Ja Morant and Derrick Rose be part of the same point guard rotation. Hasn't happened yet. We haven't seen Bismack Biyombo with any of these guys consistently because he's still relatively new. You mentioned the other day how the honeymoon period's kind of over with him. Imagine him in the pick and roll with Ja Morant, right? Imagine him in a position where he has 4 floor spacers that actually need to be respected alongside of him. Imagine all these guys playing in the role that they're supposed to be playing in. You've talked about that with numerous Grizzlies players. I think it was Desmond Bane that you mentioned. Said none of these guys are playing the spot they're supposed to be playing, or very few of them are. So whether it's their ideal role, their ideal position, there are so many pieces out of place right now that it's so difficult to make a true determination how much of this has to do with coaching. It can be frustrating. I get that as a fan. You watch the product. To me, the effort and attitude piece, we talked about that on yesterday's show, that's a non-negotiable. That needs to be something that, if that's truly in question, that's where coaching comes into play, in my opinion. Right. You can compete each and every night. You can play defense each and every night. you can go out there and give that energy and attitude of a winner. You may not win, but you control how you respond to those situations, and that is something where the Grizzlies can most certainly improve. But in terms of execution on the floor, should we really be that upset when guys that we're talking Jalen Noel, right? That's the name of the young man. And kudos to him, right? Getting this opportunity, offensive scorer. He was literally unemployed, 96 hours ago?
Yeah.
We're talking about dudes that are being pulled off the couch, pulled off of a G League team, pulled off of any court that they're trying to stay in shape, waiting for an opportunity. I'm not trying to belittle them, but they weren't NBA players for a reason, right? And now they're getting another chance with the Grizzlies to potentially realize that dream again. But let's not pretend that they're going to be these miraculous fixers of any offensive or defensive issue. Bismack Biyombo was not on a team, right? We are talking about guys that were not part of these Grizzlies plans. We're not talking plan B, plan C. We're on plan V right now in a lot of situations. And that context matters whether fans want to admit it or not. But all right, Damichael, court is adjourned. We've heard all of the arguments. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will pass a verdict. Is Taylor Jenkins guilty or not guilty of being a bad basketball coach? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a fantastic service that with the basketball season here, you can do all sorts of fun things like pick combo projections across football and basketball with the Specials League. Imagine selecting Desmond Bane and Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of three-pointers made and receptions. Imagine having Jaren Jackson Jr. and Jalen Hurts of the Eagles with a combination of rushing touchdowns and blocks. There's all sorts of fun things that you can do with Prize Picks, including having picks rebooted or players rebooted if they exit the game in the first half and don't return in the second. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. When we come back, we pass final judgment on Taylor Jenkins. You're not going to want to miss this. Stick around. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax of Bluff City Media, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. I am a Memphis Grizzlies columnist for Bluff City Media, but we are not either of those things today. Today we are the judges in the trial of Taylor Jenkins, and we are officially making our decision. And I feel like I've talked, because I get excited sometimes, right? I know that doesn't surprise you, Damichael. I get a little bit fired up, a little bit energetic. So I'm going to let you lead off with your verdict. What say you? Is Taylor Jenkins guilty?
It didn't take the jury long to come to a decision on this one. We factored in everything that was said, and we, the jury, find Taylor Jenkins not guilty of poor coaching for the Memphis Grizzlies. We, the jury, believe that Taylor Jenkins deserves due process here, and once the rest of the team is healthy, then we can revisit this conversation at a later date. I think it is completely unfair to any head coach, to anyone in any profession, to kind of tell you, all right, put one hand behind your back and get the same results that you've gotten over the past 4 seasons. It's just unrealistic. You mentioned it at the top and you alluded to the Reddit story or whatever the case may be. But the point is, sure, you put any team, you put any coach in this situation, it would be tough for anyone to see. They may have a little bit better of a record. Might not be 3-13. Someone might go, a little bit better, but no one's been 500 in this case scenario, in my opinion. So Taylor Jenkins, not guilty.
I found one of the best examples of it, and it's from the Los Angeles Lakers. Here would be the starting 5 for the Los Angeles Lakers if this process was applied to them. Starting point guard Austin Reeves, shooting guard Gabe Vincent, small forward Cam Reddish, power forward Anthony Davis, center Jackson Hayes. I feel like I just rattled off the starting lineup for the 2017 New Orleans Pelicans.
That's worse.
That's kind of what it feels like. That's not great, right?
That's worse. Yeah.
And I think that this, again, the 76ers, Tyrese Maxey at point guard, D'Anthony Melton at shooting guard, Tobias Harris at small forward, Covington at power forward, Paul Reed at center. I mean, you could just go on. And again, I want to stress, this is NBA 2K. It's not a perfect example, but it does drive home the point of just how injured the Memphis Grizzlies currently are, just how many guys they are missing, how much money in terms of people they've paid to play a lot of basketball for them not being on the floor. How many double-digit full-term contract dudes are currently not playing? At least 4 off the top of my head, probably more. You're missing Luke Kennard, Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, Steven Adams. There's your 4. Obviously, Ja is in, he's in a 9-figure deal. So you have so many pieces that have been put in place to be part of your championship contending rotation that simply aren't there. And if you want to argue they should have built the roster better, you and I have had that conversation. Should they have quadrupled down on youth? Probably not. But
those aren't Taylor Jenkins' problems. That's above.
That's a front office issue. Exactly. And even in my multiverse, where D'Anthony Melton is here and David Roddy isn't, in my multiverse where Kyle Anderson is here and maybe Jake LaRavia isn't, where Walker Kessler is here, one of those guys, and Kessler is currently injured, right? And the other 2,
he just got back. He's here now.
Right, he just returned. Thank you. And we'll talk more about that on our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies, since the Jazz are next. But you have to understand that, are Kyle Anderson and D'Anthony Melton fixing the Memphis Grizzlies? No. So sometimes it literally is as simple as they just need dudes back. And once they are closer to full strength, because they'll never have Steven Adams, at least not this season, right? Brandon Clark, maybe, but unlikely. They're not going to be full strength. But once they're closer, once they at least have Morant and Tillman and Kennard and Smart, then you have 4 out of 9 of what is going to be your actual playoff rotation if you get there. And you see how things play out over a 10, 15, 20 game stretch. Then we can have that conversation. But I'm with you. In the case of Taylor Jenkins, guilty of the crime of poor coaching, Judge Mullinax declares not guilty.
There we have it. We came to a unanimous decision here. So I think we laid out a fair case. For the people who do not agree with us, I think that what we said was very logical, made a lot of sense to them. You laid it out perfectly in terms of describing the landscape of this roster and how it would look throughout the entire NBA pretty much. And I think what I wanted to harp on more than anything was every area of this team that the Grizzlies have been elite at. They were the top rebounding team. Steven Adams is out, one of the best rebounders in the NBA, arguably the best offensive rebounder in the NBA. They were top of the league in transition scoring. Ja Morant was amazing at that. Paint scoring, Ja Morant. Brandon Clark has arguably the best floater in basketball. I know I said it last year. Oftentimes when we talked about his floater, only Nikola Jokic registered higher from a percentage perspective in floater shots than Brandon Clark. That's another guy who is terrific in the paint. So you're missing guys who aren't just essential, to the team because they're good, but they're essential to what has made the team stand out from other NBA teams.
Extremely important to understand that context matters in this situation as well as in life. And Taylor Jenkins, again, not saying he shouldn't be criticized. I'd love to see him improve in terms of adjusting his stubborn ways in terms of scheme. I don't want him to repeat the same sins of Mike Budenholzer and, eventually wind up the way Budenholzer did. Because even if you love Ja Morant, even if you love Jaren Jackson Jr., even if you love Desmond Bane, Giannis Antetokounmpo ain't walking through that door, right? Like, that dude is a legitimate ultra star in the NBA, Hall of Fame talent, Hall of Fame player, probably right now, and he still has 10 years in his career.
Definitely.
So that guy is not currently on the Memphis Grizzlies, even if Ja Morant is active. That context matters. they need to have growth as a coaching staff, but at the same time, before we can say it's the coaching staff's fault, we need to be able to see what this team looks like at full strength. So thank you, Judge Cole. I thought you did an excellent job, and you were very, very sound in your legal defenses and legal prosecution arguments. But we have declared that Taylor Jenkins is not guilty, and this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies Court is now adjourned. Thank you guys so much for checking out Locked On Grizzlies today and every day. Hopefully you're an everydayer. But if this is your first time checking out Locked On Grizzlies, welcome. It was a little bit wild today, and I apologize for that. I get excited sometimes, but hopefully you enjoyed it, and you'll come back tomorrow when we take a look at the Utah Jazz, the next team coming into Memphis, trying to make the Grizzlies continue to add evidence that Taylor Jenkins is a bad coach. Hopefully Memphis gets their first home win of the season. This team desperately needs a home victory, Damichael, in the worst way.
Yeah, they need one, and this is the time to get it. After this, I think you got Dallas at home, and this is not factoring in the 2 in-season tournament games that we'll learn about, probably here in a couple days here. But you got Dallas at home, you got Houston at home, then you get the Pacers at home. All 3 teams might be favored, and then the Pacers game will be after Ja Morant's back, but you're probably going to be underdogs in those games. This game against the Jazz should be a good opportunity to get on the right track.
We're going to break all that down and much more on our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Before we go, reminding you, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, like Damichael and myself, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. We'll talk Grizzlies, Jazz, and much more on our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Until then, thank you so much for being with us. Continue to check us out wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And, you've heard the arguments, the pros, the cons, the defense, the prosecution. What do you think? Is Taylor Jenkins guilty or not guilty? Hit us up in the comments and let us know, what say you after hearing both sides of the trial of Taylor Jenkins? For Coach Jenkins's judge and jury, in this particular instance, Damichael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. Again, check us out wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Until next time,